It's the Joe Show.
It's the Joe Show with me, Joe. It's Thoughtful Thursday, and on Thoughtful Thursday, you know what that means. We're gonna go, and think a little bit. If you're expecting some hyper editing today or some fancy editing, ain't gonna happen today. Not feeling like it. In just one of those kind of moods. On YouTube, you see all these YouTubers with their false positivity. I'm gonna be real with you here on the Joe Show. When I'm in a bad mood, you're gonna know I'm in a bad mood. But bad mood aside, let's try to put on a fake face for actual interesting content. Now, last week on Thoughtful Thursday, I discussed how I needed to pause from having emotional outbursts, and we decided together that I was going to count to 5 before acting, as the article that I was reading about was talking about emotions and having emotional outbursts, as I had a friend pull me aside and discuss that issue with me. And then I said I was going to come back and report on what happened. So here we are to report on what happened. Pretty much I got into a couple emotional states where I was having a conversation that triggered something inside of me, and I felt this tightness, like I needed to have a reaction. And usually I would have some sort of reaction and give a very fiery opinion on how I felt about something. And this time I paused, I counted to maybe 3, counted to 5, and then I continued on, or I just kept on waiting until I felt like it was the right time to act. It helped me a lot. I don't know if my colleagues, coworkers, friends, family, loved ones noticed it at all, but I can say so far it's been a positive experiment. I haven't been taking notes on it like I said I would, even though it's deliberate experimentation where you have KPIs, you take notes, or you gather the data and then compare it to the KPIs. That was the point. I didn't do that, so my bad. But that aside, next week I think I'm going to have a video discussing a new topic that I think deserves some deliberate experimentation, and that is actually negative thinking and overall negative outlook on life and pessimism, and how to start to reframe that. It's an experiment that I'm doing right now. Maybe even a little bit today, but over the next week I'm definitely going to try it out, and I'm going to try to also take notes so that I can report back to you with data. So today's thoughtful topic, though, let's move away from that. That's what's going to happen next week. Let's move into this week. It's a big topic, and that topic is genetic engineering in humans. I happened to find a bunch of questions from this person who's doing an AP research project, probably, I don't know, is that in high school or college? But they posed some interesting questions, so I wanted to read through the questions and give my opinion on them. I'm sure that you also have some sort of opinions on genetic engineering in humans. That is modifying the human genome, either pre, post birth. So pre means before something is born, and post means, afterwards when we're babies or adults. We would modify our genes to enhance our abilities somehow or protect us in some way, shape, or form. But let's hop into these questions here. The first one being, would you improve the human race through genetic engineering by eliminating certain undesirable traits and diseases? Do you believe scientists should explore this possibility at the risk of putting innocent lives in danger through experimental trials? First thing I'm going to point out here is the weird use of innocent lives in danger through experimental trials. That framing of the question implies some sort of mad scientist that is somehow gaining access to people that they're then experimenting on, or forcing people into experimentation. But that's not how clinical experimental trials work. Clinical experimental trials work with people who are signing contracts and agreeing to take part in an experiment, which would be willing participants on innocent lives, which would mean that they're willing participants in these sorts of experiments. However, if it's innocent lives, as in, do I think that it is not a good way to do this by torturous methods, kidnapping somebody and forcing them into it, then yeah, probably not the best thing to move this forward. People should not be doing that. Those are probably not scientists, but criminals. So if we're doing it though at the consent of an adult, then I don't see any negative downside to trying genetic engineering on humans, as long as it's consenting and seems to be improving lives. If we're doing it for ethically evil reasons, like we're doing an experiment to try to find some sort of application that, I don't know, destroys your body from the inside or whatever it is, then yeah, no, don't want that, because that's bioterrorism. But if we do everything, what you would call above board, I think it's totally fine. People have the right to do whatever they want with their body. 2. In 2018, Chinese scientist He Jiankui created the first genetically modified human baby by editing the CCR5 gene. Jiankou's goal was to create a child immune to AIDS. What is your reaction to this? Is it ethical for scientists to alter an embryo's genomes before they are born? This now gets into a weird gray zone, because this baby is unable to consent to a genetic experiment. However, because it is not born yet and it is an embryo being edited, it is also being born with just that gene mutation. So is there a chance that the CCR5 gene could have mutated in some way to spawn us in nature? Maybe. There's an old adage that says if you have like millions of monkeys just typing on a keyboard, eventually they'll type accidentally the works of Shakespeare. Because just if you're hitting random keys, eventually you could randomly hit all the correct letters to make a great work of fiction or of a play or whatever you want to call Shakespeare. So there is a chance that this could happen in nature. Are we just speeding up the process by doing it? Maybe. Should we do it to a baby? Possibly, because then they're just born into existence, into reality, just being that, whatever they're born as. Whereas if you do it to someone who is an adult or a child, they didn't come into the world with that gene, and thus their body might not actually react the way that you want it to. I actually think it might be better to do it pre-birth than post-birth, because then their body is able to build the genes correctly from the embryonic state. As far as the ethicalness of it, if the parents were into it, and maybe it was even his own kid, I don't know, then I'm all for it. Again, if this is not done maliciously, if it's done to try to give the kid, I don't know, some sort of super strength or something, then maybe it would be wrong, because that gives somebody an advantage and then they pass that down in the gene pool. But if it goes wrong, it could be very bad. I don't know. They're trying to build viral resistance into a person, and right now in the time of COVID-19, I think everybody is kind of open to viral resistance right now. So in that particular case, I don't think it was ethically incorrect. In other cases, I could see how it would be ethically incorrect. For example, if we're editing a baby to not be a white person, to be an Asian person, or a black person to be a white person, then you start to get into some really weird ethical situations, or even changing genders of a baby. If you wanted to have a male genitalia or female genitalia, then we get into some ethically questionable things. I would be on the side of, probably shouldn't be doing that. But viral resistance, that sounds like a good adaptation for humans. 3, a new technology named CRISPR can be used to edit DNA sequences in people after they're born to correct genetic errors that can cause disease. Do you believe this is ethical to alter human genome in order to save lives of adults and children? That's an interesting question, because the CRISPR technology is actually not super exact. So it's pretty exact, but still not exactly exact. So it can still make mistakes. And those mistakes, because we don't understand fully how genes work and how the genome works, can cause serious risks to a person if they're doing it post-birth. They can seriously injure themselves. They can cause cancer. They can cause genetic defects that then render them disabled, brain dead, whatever it might be. So I think that it's actually dangerous to be using CRISPR, or potentially dangerous to be using CRISPR on adults and children. But does that mean we should stop doing it? That's a whole nother question. Ethical, again, if it's a consenting adult, then fine, let's do it. Children, probably not the best case, unless we have some sort of trial tested, approved method that is completely safe. I mean, we give children medication, so this would just be another sort of medication. So if that's the case, and if a child develops some sort of disease or defect that we can possibly fixed through a CRISPR technology, then sure, why not? Let's do it. 4. Currently, there are a lack of international restrictions on genetic engineering in humans. Do you believe that this should be decided with each individual nation, or there should be global restrictions in place? So that's I feel like, naive question. Should there be global restrictions in place? That's hysterical. Is there anything that is completely globally restricted? No. You can put sanctions on other countries, but you cannot force other countries to do something. Like, let's just take the case of Russia or China. There's no way, or North Korea. Nobody can force them to do anything. They are ruled by somebody or something. Their citizens are either stuck there, or trapped by it, or consenting to it, and they're not going to change no matter what happens. We do have organizations that monitor the world, and there's a United Nations that tries to pressure other nations that aren't part of it into doing certain things. But there will be no global restrictions. And even if there were global restrictions, they wouldn't stop somebody in China from doing something, or wouldn't stop a rogue person in the US from doing something, or Canada, or wherever. So it's naive to think that we can have global restrictions, but it's going to come down to political pressure and a group of nations with sanctions and tariffs and political power to stop another nation from doing things like genetic engineering, which actually in the future could be dangerous, as nations may be genetically engineering themselves to an advantage for war, for famine, for whatever it is. And then it will be very hard for other nations to compete, and then they become the dominating global power in the world. So there should definitely be some sort of international pressure and lookout group that's keeping tabs on this, kind of like with nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. But there's no way that we can put global restrictions on every country that everyone's going to follow and be okay with. It's just not going to happen. That's a super naive statement. It's going to come down to individual nations, maybe even individual city-states and counties and whatever to do this stuff. Opponents of genetic engineering argue that scientists should not have the power to, quote, play God. Do you fear that the advancements in this field could make society less accepting to people who are different? We're already struggling with this. This is already a problem. We have that going on in the United States, here in Europe. There are ethnicities that are viewed less than others, and there are ethnicities that are viewed better or more favorably than others. There's gender divides between male and female and trans. There's all sorts of these sorts of societal disagreements that we already have. So sure, like, and even monetary and financial differences between rich people and poor people. Rich people are going to have more access to genetically engineer themselves to live longer, be better, faster, stronger, whatever. So yeah, I definitely fear that these advances are going to make a society less accepting of people who are different. But it's actually, I think, more than accepting, it's going to create divides between classes and people, for sure, 100%. That's already happened without this. However, genetic engineering could also bring us closer together by eliminating things like race. I mean, that's something that could be completely eliminated. We could all look exactly the same through genetic engineering. So that's another ethically weird zone to go into, is should we move the opposite direction and all look exactly alike? Opponents of genetic engineering argue, I already read that one. Likewise, if genetic engineering becomes advanced enough, should people be allowed to use this power to alter basic human traits such as height, intelligence, and athletic ability? I touched on this a little bit. It's going to create a divide because people are going to use it for this if possible. If we can edit our height, edit our intelligence, our athletic ability, maybe it will just be like, hey, I feel like I want to be this tall, and then you can be that tall. I don't know, like, we already sort people by intelligence and by height and by if they have hair or not and how well they can throw a ball in the air. Like, it's only going to exacerbate that and make it worse, and create a class divide for sure. And other nations are going to have better access to it as well. It's going to create new ethical and political and moral stances that people have for sure. Who decides which traits are normal and which constitute a disability or disorder should be left up to the discretion of the doctor or case-by-case basis. This one, I think we actually kind of know. Like, we have medical descriptions of diseases and defects, and so I think we have a grasp on that. If something is considered a defect medically, we know. If it's a disease, we know. So I think who decides is medicine. Medicine decides what's normal and what constitutes a disability or a disorder. And of course, it will be case-by-case basis. Everything is case-by-case basis. This is why we have a system of courts in the U.S., because we take cases and people are allowed to give their case and plead their case. Although we've had courts since the times of like Socrates. So medicine and the courts will decide, unfortunately. What are your greatest concerns about how genetic engineering in humans might be used? I'm actually not very concerned about how genetic engineering in humans will be used. You kind of covered it. We're going to try to advance ourselves. We're going to try to save ourselves from disease and destruction and live longer and hopefully healthier lives and give ourselves an advantage over another human, because it's all about survival, right? We want our body and ourselves to survive longer than other people, and we want to pass on our genes. Like, that's what people want, and to live an overall good and balanced and better life than our parents did. So I don't really have concerns about genetic engineering. I actually think it'll be interesting, because there's another aspect of it that's not genetic engineering, that is more like cyborgism. I have a video on it that you can look up, where Android is a human-like robot. So cyborgism, where we start integrating technology and becoming symbiotic with technology. So if we have a symbiotic technology relationship and a genetic engineering path, we're going to have people who think that if you go the technology option, you're more superior than if you go the genetic engineering route, and vice versa. And then there's going to be people who have access that can do both, genetically engineer and enhance themselves cybernetically. And then also, I mean, what if we just start uploading our brains into the cloud anyways, and we live completely digital lives? Then genetic engineering becomes irrelevant. But then that creates two different species of humans. There's the flesh bags, and then the digital humans. The human, what are we? Homo sapiens. So that'd be Homo digitus or something like that. So yeah, I mean, my concern is that it's just going to create more division and polarization, and give us new talking points about why one person is better than the other. Although I do have some amount of hope that perhaps we can use it for good, to eliminate disease, build better, stronger bodies without doing things like increasing height and changing other natural parts of us that make us all unique snowflakes, or we could all move into one glob of looking all the same and acting all the same, and then really just being completely unique based on our mindset and the way that we talk, the words that we choose, and our brains and our reality projection, as that would be truly unique if we all look the same but act completely differently. What are your thoughts on these questions? Do you even have an opinion on genetic engineering? Would you try it on yourself? What about genetic engineering excites you? What do you want to use it for? Maybe I can grow back hair. I think I look pretty fine bald, but sometimes you want options, and I don't have any options. I want to be a little bit taller. Maybe I could edit myself to be a little bit taller. Or protect myself from certain diseases. That would also be positive. So that's been today's Thoughtful Thursday. It was more of a talking episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like my content, hit that subscribe button. Mash that bell to get a notification every time I upload a new video. Until next time, think of something insightful. I love you.